Hello, and today I'm going to be doing a video on USGI jungle boots. Right here currently you see is a pair of fourth pattern ones, but I'm going to start off with the history of them. So, jungle boots actually originated from around Vietnam, and there's many different patterns of them, but the first pattern jungle boots, let me get it. Okay, so these are third patterns. So first pattern jungle boots look kind of like this. They had the Vibram sole, but the first pattern boots had leather right here where the nylon is, leather all the way up the back, and no nylon reinforcement on the side. But it did in fact have the same Vibram sole. Also, the first pattern boots did not have the steel plate in the inside of the sole for spike protection, so the first pattern jungle boots were not spike protective. And the first patterns were produced probably from around 61 to 1963, around those years. Maybe to, like, 64, but I'm not sure about that. But I know for sure they produced them through 61 to around 63. And then the second pattern boots, which are more similar to these than anything else. So the second pattern boots got rid of the leather on the calf and the back strip of leather, and they have the same exact kind of nylon running around the calf and up the back, except that it does not have the side enforcements. And the second patterns also did not have a steel plate inside the sole for spike protection, but they still had the Vibram sole. So just visually, they look very similar to these, except they do not have the nylon reinforcement on the ankle. And those were produced around 64 to 66. I think 66 was the last year they produced the second patterns. And then that brings us to these boots right here, the third patterns, which came out around 67, and they produced these probably all the way up to, I'm not sure about this, but the mid 70s, early 70s. And there's different variations of the third patterns. So the third patterns, they have the nylon reinforcement on the ankle, calf, and up the back. And if you look closely enough, you can see 6 black lines of stitching running through it. That signifies that it is third pattern, versus the fourth patterns, which have 3, 1, 2, 3. But they made the third patterns have the steel plate inside the sole, and third patterns came in 2 different types of soles. They had the earlier Vibram sole, which was most commonly used in Vietnam. The third pattern Vibram sole probably saw the most use in Vietnam. And then there's a second kind of sole that was used in the third patterns, but these are fourth patterns. But the Panama sole had came out, and they found that it was better in the jungle than the Vibram sole, because apparently the Vibram sole got like sticks and stuff got stuck up in the tiny little grooves, and then mud would get stuck up in it, and it wouldn't work that well whenever it gets all clogged up. So they sought to replace it, which they did later on. So you'll see some third pattern boots with Vibram soles, but they tend to be later, even though they were produced along the same time as the Vibram soles. And the Panama sole was great for mud and in the jungle in general, and had great traction. And from what I've experienced, mud and sticks don't get stuck in the sole. I have not worn these though, because they're old. And these ones I specifically have right now are produced in 1967. And then that brings us along to the fourth pattern boot, which is right here. So the fourth pattern boot is essentially just a third pattern boot, but improved upon. So what they did was, oh, quick little thing I forgot. So also had to tell if it's a third pattern or earlier. If it's a first, third, or second pattern, they got the back stitch on the heel. Fourth patterns and above do not. It's because how they produce the boots. But so these are fourth patterns. Fourth patterns probably came out around late 70s, and they were made into the 80s. They stopped producing them in, like, I think the late 80s, maybe even around Desert Storm, because these were the boots that were used in Desert Storm. From a lot of pictures you can see, because they were meant for hot weather, and in the desert it was hot, and they didn't have any really specific desert boots yet that they could produce in mass, so they just used the jungle boots for the most part. Some people did get desert boots though, but those were not commonly issued. To re-mention it, the fourth patterns have only 3 black lines of stitching running through it, while the thirds have 6. Also, eyelet drainage holes are different on some models. So these are the, let me try to get it closer. These are fourth pattern drainage holes. They go inwards a little bit, and then right here is third pattern ones, but they use these on the second patterns. I'm pretty sure first patterns too. But these are the earlier kind, and they stick out a little bit. These are both military contract boots. These ones right here were produced by Rose Search, and they're size 10.5R, and they're made in 1988. These are made by Bata. They are size 12R, and they were made in 1967. And now there's a little foggy area, though, that after the fourth patterns, there was apparently a regulation switch in the military that the green jungle boots were being phased out, and so they did come up with a replacement for the fourth patterns, which all that they essentially did was replace the green canvas with black nylon, everything, to switch to full black. And they have the same non-cushioned upper calf reinforcements that are non-cushioned, and those they don't really have an official pattern, but I just go ahead and myself and call those fifth patterns. But those came out around the mid 90s, because I've seen some with production numbers around 95, 93. But they're just essentially the same exact boot, except it's black nylon and it's non-cushioned. Then there's boots that came out after that in the late 90s, which I have a pair right here. These are military contract. These are not made by Ultima. But as you can see, it's essentially what I described the last time, except these have the cushions, which these are dated 97. See if I can still get it, because they're pretty faded. It used to say, like, boots, spike protective, and then it said the DSA number, then it said 97. So these are produced in 97. Row Search, size 10.5R, and made in 97. I just go ahead, there's not an official pattern for them, like I said about the last ones, but I just personally refer to them as 6 patterns, because they also added the what is it called? Speed lace, yeah, speed lace. And these are the old ones. You see, they're just eyelets, and it took time to lace those up. Meanwhile, they only kept two normal eyelets on the bottom to keep the string in place, the lace in place. Then they added speed lace all the way up. And these are the black nylon. They still have the Panama sole. These are more worn though. And they're also, the eyelets are different. Now, it depends on which company produced them though, because many different companies produced the quote-unquote 5th pattern and 6th patterns. The official military ones, though, were probably produced. These ones say Royal Search on the soles, but I know Ultima made, these but for civilian contracts, and I know the police uses these too. I've seen some police officers use them, but you can see though these drainage holes are more similar to the original um, 3rd pattern, 2nd pattern, and 1st pattern ones versus the indented inwards 4th pattern ones. But this has been my video on the different kinds of jungle boots and when they were made.